The chapel went silent the moment Sarah Collins stepped inside. Her mother's voice cut through the air like a blade. "You changed your name?" she said, not shocked, not curious, but accusing. Every head in the room turned toward Sarah. Her father's hand tightened on the funeral program until the paper bent. Her brother Mark stopped laughing near the doorway. Sarah quietly slid into the second-row seat, the program warm in her hand, her new name Sarah Morgan printed in neat black ink. The chair beside her, labeled family, sat empty, just like at every milestone they'd missed. As she stared at that untouched seat, something inside her shifted for the first time in years. She had grown up in a house where being quiet meant being forgotten. In their home in Austin, noise always meant importance, and importance never seemed to belong to her. Her mother's heels used to click across the kitchen floor whenever Mark needed something loudly, urgently, while Sarah learned to solve her own problems in silence. Her older sister, Lily, got soft voices, warm hands, and attention that lasted long after the moment passed. But Sarah? She was the girl who packed her own lunches, cleaned her own messes, and learned early not to interrupt conversations she was never really part of. "Mom?" she remembered asking once. "Not now, Sarah," her mother replied without looking at her. That sentence followed her through childhood like a shadow. Sarah first noticed the pattern when she was 12. Lily had an art show at school, bright canvases lined up against the gym wall. Their mother stood proudly beside her, fixing imaginary lint on Lily's dress and smiling for neighbors. Sarah stood nearby, holding a small certificate she had won that morning for a regional science competition. Her family hadn't remembered the event. They didn't even ask how it went. Her mother passed her like she was part of the gym wall. "Hold your sister's jacket," Mom said, placing the soft fabric in her hands without even looking up. Sarah folded the certificate into her pocket, the paper crinkling loud to her, invisible to them. Years later, during her high school graduation, the pattern continued. As the ceremony began, her row of classmates shuffled to let her parents pass after arriving late. When her name was called, she stood, scanning the crowd for her family. The chair meant for them sat empty. Her siblings had gone to a lake party. Her parents, she learned later, had stopped for coffee on the way. She gripped her program so tightly the corner tore. Afterward, when she asked why they hadn't made it on time, her father frowned and said, "Traffic, Sarah. Don't start." Lily added lightly, "You're too sensitive." Sarah said nothing. Silence had always kept the peace. College didn't change anything. At Rice University, Sarah sent reminders weeks ahead of a departmental award ceremony. Lily texted back a heart emoji. Mark left the message unread. Her parents replied days later with a casual, "We'll try." They never came. That night, Sarah ate takeout alone on the dorm steps with her awards still inside the envelope they hadn't asked about. When a friend asked if her family was coming later, she forced a smile. "They're busy," she said. But inside she wondered, am I just not worth the drive? The older Sarah became, the quieter she grew. Every time she tried to speak up, she heard her mother's familiar line, "Don't be dramatic, Sarah." Her father would nod without looking away from his phone. Eventually her protests became short, then rare, then silent. One memory clung to her tightly, the university research presentation where she shared early work on water purification. 5 seats had been reserved for her family. All 5 remained empty. She smoothed the folded program in her hands again and again, fighting the sting in her chest. During her Q&A, her phone buzzed. A text from Mark. "Grilling at my place. Wish you were here." He stared at the message. He didn't wish that. Not really. The shift inside her didn't happen suddenly. It built slowly, pressure behind a door she kept closed for years. But the breaking point came 8 months before her dissertation defense. She sent an official university announcement to her family. April 22, 3 p.m. Her mother responded hours later with a distracted, "So proud, sweetheart." Lily sent a thumbs up. Mark typed, "Nice." At Sunday dinners, Sarah repeated the date every week. "Mom, remember it's April 22 at 3. Yes, her mother mumbled, scrolling through her phone. Lily talked about her kids' soccer schedules. Mark bragged about his latest barbecue recipe. Sarah kept reminding them anyway. 5 months, 3 months, 6 weeks, 2 weeks. Then one morning she saw the invitation Mark posted on Facebook. Spring Barbecue Bash April 22, 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. She stared at the screen until the letters blurred. He called him instantly. Mark, that's the same day. What time is your thing again? He asked, sounding genuinely confused. 3. You know that. People can do both. Just come after. Stanford is an hour away, she reminded him quietly. So, it's not that deep, he said. But it was. Then she called her mother. Honey, Mom laughed softly, don't be dramatic. We'll work something out. But Sarah already felt it. They weren't confused, weren't busy. They just chose something else. The final confirmation came the day before Sarah's defense. Her mother answered the phone over loud music. I'm at Mark's helping set up. Total chaos here, she laughed. And tomorrow? Sarah asked. Her voice wavered before she forced it steady. 3 o'clock, right? We'll be there, her mother said, distracted. Lily's bringing dessert. Then she hung up. The next afternoon, 30 minutes before Sarah's defense, her phone rang again. Where are you? Her mother asked. We're all at Mark's. The barbecue started early. Sarah didn't respond. She let the silence stretch across the call until her mother said, Well? Say something. Sarah finally whispered, Goodbye, and ended the call. She didn't cry in the hallway outside the presentation hall. She didn't call anyone back. She didn't send reminders. Instead, she gathered her notes, walked inside, and defended 8 years of work alone. When the committee members stood and shook her hand, the words, Congratulations, Dr. Sarah Collins, echoed across the room. But she felt nothing except a quiet ache she had carried all her life. That night, while unanswered texts and missed calls from her family lit up her screen, Sarah opened her laptop. She created a new folder titled Transition. No anger. No tears. Just order. And the first step toward a life her family would no longer control. Sarah began with the basics. She downloaded the name change petition from the county website and printed it. The soft hum of the printer filled her quiet apartment, sounding almost like a heartbeat. She sat at her desk with a highlighter and worked through each instruction line by line. Identification required. Proof of residence. Signatures in blue ink. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. She just followed the steps the way she followed every plan in her life, carefully and alone. By midnight, she had already created 2 spreadsheets. One listing every account tied to the name Collins, and another mapping how each would shift under Morgan. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. The next morning, Sarah woke early. She brewed coffee, the steam curling softly into the cool air of her apartment. Then she dressed in a navy blouse, pressed slacks, and tied her hair back with deliberate precision. At the county courthouse, the clerk slid a stack of forms toward her. Fill these out, the woman said. Sarah nodded, sitting by the window where sunlight spilled across the desk. Line by line, she wrote her new name. Sarah Morgan. Each signature felt like a quiet exhale, like she was stepping out of a shadow she had lived in for years. When she returned the forms, the clerk stamped the top page. The sound was crisp. Final. Processing takes a few weeks, the clerk said. That's fine, Sarah replied. The next days were quiet and strangely steady. She updated her email first. Clean, simple, free from family threads. She transferred her research files to a new cloud drive and deleted the old one. She archived messages from colleagues and mentors. The only thing she didn't delete was a small folder labeled Grandma Ruth. Inside were photos, birthday letters, and small notes written in her grandmother's sure, looping handwriting. Some nights, Sarah touched the edges of those letters gently, feeling the paper soften from age. Her grandmother had been the only one who truly saw her, who asked questions and waited for answers. Changing her name didn't erase that. If anything, it honored it. When it was time to move, Sarah boxed her apartment with the same quiet determination she'd cultivated her whole life. Books were stacked neatly. Clothes folded smooth. Photo frames wrapped in paper and turned face down. That night, she stood in the middle of her living room, listening to the refrigerator hum like a distant memory. Her phone buzzed nonstop, calls from her mother, messages from Lily, a few from Mark. Where are you? This isn't funny. We need to talk. Stop overreacting. Come home. No. But she didn't reply. Silence, her oldest companion, sat beside her. And for once it didn't feel heavy. It felt right. When the moving truck pulled away, carrying everything she owned toward Portland, Sarah locked the apartment door and rested her hand on the cool metal. Not with sadness, just a moment of stillness. The long drive north stretched over 2 days. Gas stations, coffee cups, highways framed by endless fields. Each mile dissolved another thin thread tying her to Austin. Portland greeted her with gray skies and soft drizzle weather that felt like breathing after holding her breath for too long. Her new apartment was small but bright, with a narrow balcony overlooking a quiet tree-lined street. She placed her boxes by the window and unpacked the one labeled work first. On top was a picture of her and Grandma Ruth. She pinned it above her new desk. Her first day at the environmental consulting firm felt unreal. A warm receptionist welcomed her. Colleagues introduced themselves one by one, offering smiles instead of comparisons. No one asked about her family. No one said, "You're too sensitive." No one asked why she wasn't more like Lily or Mark. At her desk, she logged into her new email account. Sarah Morgan printed at the top of the screen. Seeing that name there grounded her. Later, a coworker named Alex stopped by. "You settling in okay?" he asked. She nodded. "It feels peaceful." "Good," he said simply. "You deserve that." It startled her how natural those words sounded from someone who wasn't related to her. Every evening, Sarah continued the administrative work of rebuilding her identity. She updated her driver's license, voter registration, medical files, and emergency contacts. She closed her last bank account under the name Collins. Each process made a small sound. The click of a mouse. The rip of an envelope. The scratch of a pen. The slide of a form into a completed folder. Nothing dramatic. Nothing explosive. Just quiet progress, hers and hers alone. Sometimes she paused at the window, letting Oregon's cool air drift in. She'd pick up another document, feel her chest tighten, then loosen again. This time she wasn't fixing what her family broke. She was building something that didn't require their presence. Weeks later the email arrived. "Your name change petition has been approved." Sarah stared at the message for a long, still moment. Then she printed the confirmation. The paper was warm when she slipped it into a folder labeled Identity. It was done. She didn't announce it. She didn't text anyone. She didn't wait for permission or apology. She just lived quietly, firmly, entirely as Sarah Morgan. Silence didn't stay silent for long. A week later, HR forwarded an alert. "Your emergency contact attempted access. Request denied." Her old phone number was disconnected. Her old email was archived. Her personnel file flagged her family as unverified relationship. The system locked them out automatically. Another message followed from the manager of her old apartment complex. "Your family has asked for your forwarding address," the voicemail said. "We cannot release that information." Sarah didn't return the call. She didn't need to. One evening, she powered on the old phone she kept in a drawer. 83 missed calls from her mother. Dozens from Lily. A handful from Mark. One from her father. The voicemails grew more frantic each day. "Where did you go? This isn't funny, Sarah. You're overreacting. You owe us an explanation." She listened for a moment, just enough. Then she powered off the phone and placed it back in the drawer. The air felt lighter. For the first time in her life, their voices couldn't find her. The moment that pulled her back to Austin arrived quietly one morning. A letter from her Aunt Ruth's attorney sat in her mailbox. Aunt Ruth, gentle, observant, the only person who ever noticed Sarah's silences, had passed away peacefully. Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, holding the envelope in both hands. There was no hesitation. She knew she had to go. Not for her family, but for Aunt Ruth, the one person who had shown up for her without being asked. She booked a ticket for the weekend funeral, packed a small suitcase, and placed the folder labeled Identity inside. Her new name was real now. And Austin would see it. The chapel looked the same as it had years ago, polished wood, soft lighting, lilies filling the air with a heavy sweetness. Sarah walked in early, choosing a seat near the aisle. Her hands rested around the printed program. Her new name, Sarah Morgan, stood clearly beneath beloved niece. It felt right. It felt earned. Minutes later, the double doors opened. Her family entered like a wave. Her mother stopped mid-step when she saw her. "You changed your name?" she whispered, not in confusion but accusation. Her father's jaw tightened. Lily blinked quickly, unsure. Mark looked as if someone had knocked the breath out of him. Sarah simply replied, "Yes." "You should have told us," her mother hissed, stepping closer. Sarah kept her voice level. "You should have shown up." Before her mother could argue, the chapel attendant raised a hand for silence. Everyone sat. Everyone except Mark, who kept glancing back at Sarah like she was a stranger wearing his sister's face. During the hymns, her mother's eyes drifted toward her over and over, frustration, confusion, something like fear mingling in her expression. She wasn't angry because Sarah changed her name. She was angry because the control was gone. After the service ended, her mother followed her outside to the parking lot. "This isn't fair," she whispered harshly. "Families move past things." Sarah opened her rental car door but didn't step inside. "You chose a barbecue over my doctorate," she said calmly. "You didn't forget. You prioritized." "That's not true," her mother snapped. "It is," Sarah replied. Her mother's face shifted. A crack of realization. A fracture of fear. The beginning of consequences she couldn't control. Lily approached next, her voice softer. "Sarah, you didn't have to go this far." Sarah turned to her. "I didn't go far. I went where I was seen." Lily swallowed hard but didn't argue. She knew it was true. Mark didn't speak at all. He hovered behind them, hands in his pockets, eyes down. For once, silence made him uncomfortable, not her. Sarah stepped into her car, closed the door, and watched them blur behind the glass as she pulled away. They couldn't follow her. Not legally. Not emotionally. Not digitally. The life tied to Sarah Collins was gone. And she didn't want it back. Back in Portland, the city settled around her like a soft blanket, quiet, steady, forgiving. She built new routines without thinking. Walking to work under gray skies. Making coffee in her small bright kitchen. Listening to soft rain drum against her balcony railing. Her name, Sarah Morgan, appeared on reports, memos, and email signatures. Every time she saw it, something grounded inside her. At meetings, colleagues listened when she spoke. No comparisons. No dismissive looks. Just respect. This was a life she built. Not one she begged for. Alex became an easy part of her new world. He showed up with 2 cups of coffee some mornings, handing one to her with a small smile. "You working on the water model again?" he'd ask. "Always," she'd laugh softly. He asked questions and waited for her answers. He remembered things she said in passing. He treated her like someone worth listening to, something she was still learning to accept. One afternoon he said, "You seem calmer lately." Sarah looked out the window for a moment. "I think I finally stopped trying to be heard in places where people never listened," she replied. Alex nodded as if that made all the sense in the world. Some nights, Sarah wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and sat on the balcony watching the city's soft lights flicker. The memory of her empty seat at her dissertation defense floated through her mind now and then. But it didn't hurt the way it used to. It felt small now. Like an old photograph folded at the edges. She didn't hate her family. That surprised her. Hatred required carrying something heavy. And she had put their weight down. The name change hadn't severed the past. It had simply drawn a clean, honest line through it. One rainy evening it struck her. She hadn't run away from her family. She hadn't disappeared to punish them. She had simply walked toward herself. Toward a name she chose. A life she built. A place she belonged. The boundaries she created weren't walls. They were doors she finally stopped trying to open. "People show you who they are," she whispered to herself, watching raindrops race down the balcony glass. "And one day, you believe them." When Sarah stood to go back inside, she caught her reflection in the balcony door. Calm eyes, steady breath. A woman who finally looked like she belonged to herself. She whispered her name softly. Sarah Morgan. For the first time in her life, the silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt whole. It felt peaceful. It felt like hers. And she knew one thing with absolute clarity. Some doors stay closed not because she was locked out, but because she no longer wanted to walk through them. The weeks that followed settled into a quiet rhythm. Sarah woke before sunrise, brewed coffee, and reviewed water models at her dining table. Sometimes she walked to work in a soft drizzle, her steps unhurried. She no longer felt the need to shrink herself. Her life didn't circle around anyone's moods or approval. One morning, as she prepared a new presentation for a team meeting, Alex stopped by her desk and leaned gently on the edge. "You seem happier," he said. Sarah paused, looking at him. I'm lighter, she replied. There's a difference. He smiled. Keep going. It looks good on you. For the first time in her adult life, she believed someone meant those words. Her family still called, but far less than before. The old phone in her drawer stayed powered off. She didn't check it. He didn't want to. One Sunday she sat on her balcony with a cup of tea and wondered, for the first time without sadness, how different her life felt without the constant noise of their demands. No guilt. No explanations. No scrambling to earn crumbs of attention. Just her. That evening she journaled quietly. Maybe healing isn't fixing what people broke, she wrote. Maybe it's building a life where their absence doesn't hurt. Work gave her something her family never had: stability. Her supervisor admired her research, her colleagues trusted her judgment, and projects began carrying her name. One afternoon, after she presented a major update on a water sustainability plan, her supervisor clapped her on the back. Brilliant work, Sarah, he said. The praise startled her. She wasn't used to being praised without someone else absorbing the credit. Thank you, she replied softly. You earned it, he said, walking away. Sarah stood there for a moment, stunned by how powerful simple recognition felt when it came without conditions. A month later, she received an invitation from her department to speak at a regional science forum. Her name, Sarah Morgan, was printed boldly across the letterhead. He stared at it for a long time. Not in disbelief, but in pride. That evening she told Alex. That's huge, he said. Are you nervous? Not nervous, she replied. Prepared. You'll be incredible, he said with a smile. Sarah felt something warm settle in her chest, not the ache of being overlooked, but the quiet glow of finally being seen. On the morning of her presentation, she stood backstage with her notes in hand. She expected nerves, but what she felt instead was steadiness. When her name was announced, the applause filled the auditorium. She stepped onto the stage, took a breath, and began. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble. She spoke with clarity, confidence, and calm. Afterward, people lined up to speak to her, students with questions, researchers with interest, colleagues with praise. None of them knew anything about her family. All they saw was her work, her skill, her presence. It felt like reclaiming something she had lost long ago. Later that evening, she walked home in a gentle rain. Portland's streetlights glowed softly through the mist. She felt full of purpose, of peace, of possibility. She paused on a bridge overlooking the river and leaned on the railing. This is my life now, she whispered. Not a hope. Not a wish. Her phone buzzed in her bag, the new one, not with family messages, but with a simple text from Alex. You were incredible today. Dinner tomorrow? She smiled. Her life was expanding in directions her past could never touch. On Saturday morning, she went to the farmer's market with Alex. They walked between bright stalls, laughing about how many jars of honey he insisted were absolutely essential. You're impossible, Sarah teased. And you're patient, he replied. For a moment she wondered if she was ready for something new, for trust, for friendship, for connection that wasn't built on survival. Alex glanced at her. You okay? She nodded. Better than okay. Good, he said softly. You deserve that. And she believed him. That night she sat on her couch with a bowl of soup and opened the folder labeled Identity. Her new documents were neatly arranged inside. Driver's license, updated passport, social security records, work files. At the bottom was the program from Aunt Ruth's funeral. She held it gently. Her grandmother had been the only one who ever sent her birthday cards, who asked real questions, who offered warmth without making her earn it. Sarah whispered, I hope you'd be proud of me. A quiet certainty settled inside her. Aunt Ruth would be. One evening as she organized her files, her doorbell rang. It startled her. She rarely had unexpected visitors. When she opened the door, a courier stood outside holding a small sealed envelope. For Sarah Morgan, he said. Yes, that's me. Inside was a short letter from the attorney handling Aunt Ruth's estate. Aunt Ruth had left her a small inheritance with a handwritten message attached. For the life I always knew you'd build. Ruth. Tears filled Sarah's eyes, not from pain, but from recognition. A few days later, Sarah decided to take a quiet morning to herself. She walked along the river, letting the cool air wrap around her. Families laughed nearby, Children biked along the path and dogs ran through the grass. For the first time she didn't feel the sting of watching families that weren't hers. She felt content. She sat on a bench and closed her eyes. No noise. No tension. No expectations. Just peace. A peace she had created step by step, name by name, boundary by boundary. That evening she received an email requesting her participation in a water symposium in Seattle. It was another step forward, another door opening. When she accepted, a small thrill ran through her. He was moving. He was growing. Later that night Alex called. "You'll do amazing in Seattle," he said. "You think so?" "I know so." It felt good to have someone in her corner, but it felt even better knowing she no longer needed anyone to validate her worth. As the months passed, her new life took shape fully. Her apartment filled with warmth and small signs of joy, plants on the windowsill, books spread across the table, a soft throw blanket Alex convinced her to buy. Whenever rain fell, she sat by the balcony door and watched the drops streak down the glass. She thought of Austin sometimes, but the memories no longer controlled her. They existed, but they no longer owned her. She whispered her new name occasionally, testing its weight. Sarah Morgan. It felt like home. One afternoon as she packed for Seattle, she caught her reflection again, steadier than she had ever known herself to be. Her journey hadn't been dramatic or loud. It had been quiet, step by step, decision by decision. She thought back to the empty chair at her dissertation defense, the moment she realized no one was coming for her. Now she understood. She had been waiting for people who were never going to show up. And she had stayed too long in rooms that didn't want her. She zipped her suitcase and smiled softly. Not out of bitterness, but out of freedom. Before heading to the airport, she walked to her balcony one last time that night. The city lights shimmered, reflecting off wet streets. She wrapped her arms around herself gently. "I'm enough," she whispered. "I always was." Her past had taught her to survive. Her present was teaching her to live. And her future, she knew, now belonged entirely to her, without apology. She closed the balcony door behind her. As she stepped into the hallway with her suitcase rolling quietly behind her, Sarah felt a deep, steady certainty settle in her bones. She didn't need her family's approval, presence, or permission. The girl who once waited for them in crowded rooms had become a woman who chose herself, every single day. Her new name wasn't an escape. It was a declaration. Sarah Morgan walked forward, calm and unafraid, stepping into a life built on her own terms. And this time the silence wasn't loneliness. It was peace. A peace she claimed. And a peace she planned to keep. Moral lesson. You don't have to stay where you aren't valued. Choosing yourself is not selfish, it's survival, healing, and finally learning to stand where you are seen.